It's great to be here. It's fantastic to be speaking as part of Participate 2013. And of course, with the harbour behind us, what more could one want in a way? I have notes. I am a child of the 20th century. There is nothing I can do about that. I will do my best not to simply peer into them. I'm going to talk briefly today about what online participation means for Greenpeace. And I'm going to do that by focusing on our current campaign against the beverage manufacturer Coca Cola. Now, actually, let me put that another way. My appearance with you today is proudly sponsored by Coca Cola. If I can thank Coca Cola for that sponsorship authentically. Now, the story that I will tell is fundamentally one where online participation has enabled we, the people, to fight back in a way that would not have otherwise been possible against massive corporate power. First, though, I want to start with a bit of ancient history. I want to go back. I want to go way, way, way back. I want to go all the way back to 1992. Now, there will be those of us in this room who weren't born in 1992. I'd already made it out of the school choir by then, I can give you that reassurance. This is David McTaggart. Now, I never had the honour of knowing David. He was tragically killed in a car crash. But David McTaggart in his time was a giant of the environmental movement, and he was one of Greenpeace's most inspirational leaders. And it was back in the ancient days of 1992 that David McTaggart sent a memo around via email. Greenpeace was an early technology adopter of email. In which he described the Greenpeace mission as follows. And there's a blue version of this and a censored version of this, but given the introduction provided by our esteemed host today, I'll give you the blue version. McTaggart said, "We've got to get our world into the 21st century in one piece, fuck everything else." Yeah, that didn't go down that well, really. Now, with those words, what McTaggart did was identified Greenpeace's mission with blunt clarity. And to be clear, he wasn't saying that there weren't a whole lot of other things that mattered. What he was doing was saying back to Greenpeace, this is our job. This is our job. We've got to get the world into the 21st century. Well, we're now well into the 21st century, of course, but the job remains the same. We've still got to keep the world in one piece, and for Greenpeace, still, screw everything else. That's our role. Not the screwing everything else, the keeping the world in one piece. But if the mission remains unaltered, as we know, the communications environment has radically changed. It's been transformed by the digital revolution. And let's face it, I wouldn't accept that Greenpeace was ever a fringe organisation, far from that. But our modus, very much founded in the physical reality of the real world. We send undercover teams in. We do the investigations. You sail a ship into a nuclear test site. I mean, what could be more physical than that? You go and you block a pipe, or you do one of those direct communications where you try and speak truth to power by writing "No War" on the Opera House, or by dropping a banner off a landmark. So the question for us was really, how does mass online participation of the kind that we all just take for granted now as part of our daily society, how does that change the focus for an organisation that really was founded in a time that was very, very different? And the short answer is the mission hasn't changed, but there's a whole lot more options down the action menu. Now, there's much to say about the great debate about what online participation means. There's Malcolm Gladwell and Clay Shirky and Mika White, and behind that a whole lot of others like Richard Sennett and Ulrich Beck and Reggie Debray, who are absolutely worth reading about this. And I'm not just an uncritical cheerleader. I think there is real force in the critique of Mika White, for instance, and I'd be happy to talk about that. But ultimately, as a campaigner, I'm really inclined to Clay Shirky's pragmatic assessment that the fact that barely committed actors cannot click their way to a better world does not mean that committed actors cannot use social media effectively. In my experience, we do and we can, but the crucial question is always if and how online participation can increase the pressure on a campaign target. Now let's take, for example, Now, this was an image from our campaign against Nestle vis-a-vis rainforest clearance in 2010. And Nestle's bungling is now a world-famous and well-known case study of how not to respond to social media pressure. They went on Facebook and tried to censor their own page, essentially. And I remember standing there watching as the social media fail just kind of exploded over the course of one afternoon. And that has become a case study in how corporations don't deal with social media pressure. To be absolutely clear though, social media is very useful to Greenpeace, but we haven't abandoned the physical interventions that are the hallmark of the way we work. Now, this is an image from something we did just a couple of weeks ago where a number of activists from Queensland and from around the world boarded a coal ship in Queensland waters that was trying to take coal out of Australia in support of our campaign to try and stop the expansion of thermal coal exports, which is going to screw the climate and do dreadful direct damage to the Great Barrier Reef. And there's what one of Australia's most prominent social commentators had to say about the action. But the thing about the rich possibilities of the digital space is that there are whole new campaign opportunities in addition to direct physical intervention. No longer does Dan simply have to travel across to Guantanamo Bay to try and bust David Hicks out. He can make a film about it as well. And when we talk about combining the real-world activities with the digital activities, it takes us to Coca Cola. Now, every campaign starts with the identification of a problem. And here, the campaign is directed at the curse that is the plastic pollution littering our parks and oceans, clogging up our creeks, ruining our beaches, and ending up in those massive soups that swirl around in the centre of the world's great oceans. The impact on wildlife is depressing and dismal and appalling. Scientists reckon that around 2/3 of Australian seabirds are adversely impacted by plastic. Adversely impacted sounds awfully sort of, these are not dramatic words, but if what we're thinking about is these are animals that are literally choking on a full stomach as they eat the tops of bottles and so on, imagining it's food and are unable to digest them and end up as dead birds looking like that. It's grim stuff, starving on a stomach full of plastic waste. And one heck of a lot of this trash comes from the beverage sector. 7 billion cans and bottles end up in landfill or are just thrown away every year. Now, the good news is that it is possible to massively reduce the amount of plastic pollution from the beverage sector that ends up in the environment. Now, I know it will hurt a group of people sitting next to Sydney Harbour to be given a lesson coming from Adelaide. I understand that will be painful, but in South Australia and in 43 other precincts around the world, there's a scheme in operation known as Cash for Containers, which is proven. It achieves up to 90% recycling rates in some jurisdictions. It works. There's a demonstrated solution out there. But despite the fact there's a demonstrated solution that works, beverage giant Coca Cola Amatil has been campaigning for many years. They've litigated, they've lobbied, there have been campaign donations to prevent the scheme from being rolled out. So Greenpeace is campaigning against Coke to move out of the way, to get the company to drop their opposition to container recycling, to create some democratic space in which politicians can act. Now, our campaign against Coke has included activities in the real world, but from the outset it was always our intention to apply pressure in the digital space. So we made this advertisement.
We don't sleep when the sun goes down. We don't waste no precious time. All my friends in the loop, making up for teen.
Now, I should say we did have the help of an agency to produce that, and we're pretty pleased with the result. The plan was always, as I say, to distribute the film online, but also we were hoping to crowdsource to pay for the mock ad to be screened on at least once in primetime commercial TV, and the response from the crowd was extremely positive. People are outraged when they learn about Coca Cola blocking something that is so obvious and so practical and so clearly works. It's very popular in South Australia as well. Something, that was the sound of a Coca Cola executive just falling off chairs. But something fascinating happened. Although we had the money and gave it to Channel 9 in the usual way, they refused to screen it. So we had the slot booked on Friday Night Football, and they accepted our money for it, trousered it, I believe is the preferred term, but then they refused to screen the commercial on the basis, so they said, that it was offensive. Now, I don't know if you've watched any commercial TV late on a Friday night any time recently, but let me tell you, that is not the worst thing on commercial TV on a Friday night. It had been rated by the appropriate agency. It wasn't like we came out of the blue. Anyway, we thought to ourselves, perhaps Channel 9 don't get this, but there are other stations out there, Marketplace and all the rest of it. Went to Channel 7, Channel 10, SBS. They all turned us down. Conventional screen media effectively applied a form of commercial censorship. Who knew that recycling was so dynamite for people? But what about social media? Well, the ad has done rather well there. It was for a time tracking at more than 100,000 hits a day. It's now at just under 1.2 million hits just over a fortnight, and it seems to be picking up speed again. It's interesting the way these things sort of rise and dip and then rise again. Now, presumably, that's more than 1 million or so people, many of whom in Australia, will now see the familiar Coca Cola logo and just hear the thud of a dead seabird. Well, I mean, if that's the marketing outcome that Coca Cola wanted from trying to block recycling schemes in this country, they will be well pleased with the result they have. If not, they may want to rethink what they're doing. Undoubtedly, attention has been helped along by the controversies caused by the commercial censorship by Channel 9 and the other TV stations, but Coke still hasn't learned. Just last week, it was revealed that Coke had bought the top advertising slot for searches for the word Greenpeace on Google. Now, I mean, this is an outrageous step, but of course, what it served to do was just draw more attention to the ad that you have just seen, and it's led to some nice coverage of Coke's antics, including this in the Fairfax Press, where they simply ran the screen grab from Google of the Google wars. Now, Coke has denied that its online advertising efforts are aimed at gagging discussion about recycling. Let me give you Coca-Cola's own words on the matter. They've said on record that the idea that we are trying to shut down debate is simply not supported by the facts. Ah yes, there's nothing like a brand you can trust. So, to conclude, the takeaway message from the Coke campaign is a simple one, and I guess in a sense it's a one that probably those of us who are here today would have shared in any event, and it's this. It's that online media has enabled the mass participation of concerned Australians and allowed Greenpeace to exert considerable pressure on Coke despite the unwillingness of TV stations to go near the issue in a way that would have been impossible before the digital age. Ultimately though, and I will finish on this, conventional politics remains crucial. What we're trying to do is to free Australian politicians from the sticky hands of Coca Cola. But in the end, it is up to our political leaders to do the right thing. And in New South Wales, ultimately, we need Premier Barry O'Farrell, and we understand he's a bloke who loves a good bit of coastline, so good on him. We need him to really step up on this issue. We need Australia's political leaders to show that we are not a pop-drink democracy. I mean, after all, what could be more ludicrous or embarrassing than for the world's 11th or 12th biggest economy, a sophisticated liberal democracy, to have public policy dictated by the manufacturer manufacturers of fizzy drinks. It is as embarrassing as it is absurd, and it shouldn't be allowed, and we, the people, shall endeavour to do our best to make sure that it is not so. Because ultimately, the bottom line, we've got to get the place into the 22nd century and screw everything else. Thanks.